Chapter 17. The Emigration. Hijra. The Emigration to Yathrib, Medina. After the second Aqaba allegiance, Prophet Muhammad granted permission to his companions to emigrate to Yathrib. Upon such permission being given, the first to emigrate were Amr ibn Rabi'ah and his wife Layla bint Hasma. The other companions then began to leave Mecca in groups. It is important to note at this point that there were a few companions who had left Mecca for Yathrib prior to this. They were Abu Salama al-Makhzumi and his wife Salama, who emigrated before the first Aqaba allegiance, and Mus'ab ibn Umayrah and Abdullah ibn Maktum, who the Prophet sent as his envoys to Yathrib following the first Aqaba allegiance in order to convey the message of Islam. In general, emigration was carried out in secret. This was because the Qurayshi polytheists did not want to allow the Muslims to leave Mecca, did whatever was in their power to prevent them from emigrating, and went as far as imprisoning some of the Muslims. For instance, when Abu Salama and his wife Salama returned to Mecca from Abyssinia, and Abu Salama had made preparations to take his wife and son Salama with him to Yathrib, just as they were about to set off, Salama's family did not allow her to go. For this reason, Abu Salama was forced to emigrate alone, leaving his wife and child in Mecca. On the other hand, in reaction to what Salama's family had done, Abu Salama's family took young Salama away from his mother. With the deep anguish of separation from both her husband and her son, Salama wept for an entire year. Her relatives eventually showed mercy and allowed her to go to Yathrib. Abu Salama's family handed Salama back to his mother. Salama left Mecca on her own, taking her son with her. She reached Quba accompanied by Uthrum ibn Talha, whom she encountered along the way, and reunited with Abu Salama there. Hisham ibn al-As had made preparations for emigration, but was chained and imprisoned by his own father, As ibn Wa'il, as well as other polytheists. Ayyash ibn Abu Rabia managed to reach Quba after leaving Mecca. Yet his brothers Abu Jahl and Harith ibn Hisham caught up with him here, and, having claimed that his elderly mother was in a distraught state due to his having left, persuaded him to return to Mecca, where they consequently imprisoned him. Hisham ibn al-As and Ayyash ibn Abu Rabia were only able to escape in the 7th year after the emigration, 629, and thus left for Medina. Becoming aware of Suhaib ibn Sinan al-Rumi's plans to emigrate, the Meccans did not repay their debts to him, and on top of that seized his property and personal effects. Suhaib was only able to emigrate after leaving to the Meccans everything that he had earned until that day. At this juncture, Umar's emigration carries special importance. After circumambulating the Kaaba and performing 2 units of prayer, Umar left for his journey in open defiance of the polytheists. After permission to emigrate had been granted, the majority of the companions emigrated to Medina over a relatively short period of time. Remaining behind were Prophet Muhammad and Abu Bakr with their families, Ali and his mother, those who were not physically able to emigrate, as well as those whose emigration was prevented by the Meccans. Meanwhile, Abu Bakr's repeated requests to emigrate were answered with the Prophet's words, "Don't be in a hurry. It may be that God will grant you a companion." Seeing that the Muslims were giving up their homes, possessions, and assets for their faith with a never-before-seen spirit of sacrifice and emigrating to Yathrib, the Quraysh started to worry that the Prophet too, one day going there, would together with his companions pose a threat to them. They met at Dar al-Nadwa, council chambers, to determine the course of action they would pursue in the face of such developments. In the meeting, to which no members of the Prophet's clan, the Banu Hashim, were invited, suggestions that the Prophet be sent to exile or imprisoned were put forward. Eventually they decided, on the suggestion of Abu Jahl, to kill the Prophet, and, so as to prevent a blood feud with the Banu Hashim, settled on this being carried out not by one individual, but by a group of representatives from all clans. Learning of this assassination plot from Quranic revelation, the Prophet immediately took action, going to Abu Bakr's house and beginning preparations for emigration together with him. They hired Abdullah ibn Uraykit as a guide to show them the way. As well as being a polytheist, Abdullah ibn Uraykit was a trustworthy and brave man. Abu Bakr gave him the 2 camels that he had prepared for emigration, and agreed to meet him 3 days later at the foothills of Mount Thawr. Prophet Muhammad assigned Ali the duty of ensuring that the polytheist did not suspect his having left his home, and returning items that had been entrusted to him back to their rightful owners. Setting out in the middle of the night, Prophet Muhammad and Abu Bakr reached Mount Thawr, located to Makkah southwest, and hid in a cave therein. Throughout the 3 days of their hiding there, Abu Bakr's son Abdullah would visit them under cover of night and report on the developments in Makkah. Moreover, Amr ibn Fuhayra, who used to herd Abu Bakr's sheep, brought the Prophet and his companion milk and food by shepherding his flock of sheep up the mountain to the cave. He later emigrated with them. The Meccan polytheists were shocked to find Ali in the Prophet's house instead of the Prophet himself. They asked Ali where he was, beating and apprehending him when they could not get an answer. Ali was later released. The Quraysh tried to obtain information from Asma, Abu Bakr's daughter. Abu Jahl had no qualms assaulting Asma when he could not obtain the information he wanted. The idolaters did not find the Prophet in Makkah. Realizing that Prophet Muhammad had left Makkah, the Quraysh commenced a search of the surroundings and sent envoys to neighbouring places. At one stage, they came all the way to the entrance of Mount Thawr. However, as a result of the divine command, the cave's entrance was covered with a cobweb, and thus they returned, supposing that no one could possibly be in there. When in front of the cave's entrance, Abu Bakr became overcome with apprehension that they might be noticed. The Prophet calmed Abu Bakr, saying, "Do not grieve, God is surely with us," as expressed in the Quran. As was decided upon beforehand, guide Abdullah ibn Uraykit came to Mount Thawr with the camels after 3 days. They set out from Mount Thawr to Yathrib along the coastal road. The caravan took a different path towards their destination instead of the well-known and travelled roads, and sometimes they preferred to go through steep mountain crossings or through the middle of the desert, lest the Quraysh should find them. While the Quraysh, who appealed to various ways to find them, pledged to give 100 camels to any person who did so, they were unsuccessful. Suraka ibn Malik, a very proficient tracker who wanted to win the promised prize, reached the caravan. However, the feet of his camel miraculously became lodged in the sand. As he tried to escape, Suraka abandoned his tracking. A similar threat was experienced when they passed through the lands of the Aslam tribe. Tribal chieftain Buraida ibn Husayb intercepted the convoy. However, after conversing briefly with the Prophet, both he and his tribe embraced Islam. Buraida accompanied the convoy until they left the lands of his tribe. When they reached Jufa, the point of intersection between the emigration route and the one followed by caravans, Prophet Muhammad remembered the road to Makkah and became grieved with the longing he felt for the city. Upon this, the verse giving the glad tidings of the return to Makkah, from which he was forced to emigrate due to severe persecution by means of victory over his enemies, was revealed. There were certain positive episodes that took place during the emigration. For instance, In order to purchase something to eat, the convoy stopped at the tent in which Ma'bad Atika bint Khalid resided. Here the Prophet began to milk a doe too scrawny to join the rest of the herd and whose udder had gone dry. He began by invoking the name of Allah. The doe then provided enough milk as to feed to their full all those who were present. Ma'bad later related the incident to her husband, who returned to the tent, and upon her husband's insistence provided a florid description of the messenger. Her expressions have become the subject matter of the Hijra literature and have survived until the present day. News of the Prophet's departure from Mecca had reached the Yathribite Muslims, and they became anxious due to the convoy's delayed arrival. Eagerly expecting his arrival, they would go out each morning to the outskirts of the city, to the Hijra district, and await his arrival there until the sun became unbearable. They were returning to their homes on a Monday, the 8th of Rabi al-Awwal, 20th September 622, as they had on previous days, when a Jewish girl on the roof of a 3-story house saw the approaching convoy. She realized that this convoy was the awaited one, and she announced its arrival by crying out loudly. Upon hearing this, the Muslims rushed to Hijra to greet the Prophet Muhammad. The Prophet stayed as a guest in Quba, 1 hour's distance from Yathrib, in the house of Kulthum ibn Hidn. He stayed in Quba for several days and had a mosque built there. In the meantime, Ali had returned the trusts left to him by the Prophet to their rightful owners, as the Prophet had instructed him to do, and had left Mecca. Hiding by day and travelling by night, he finally arrived in Quba and met up with the Prophet there. It is reported that Ali's mother, Fatima bint Asad, the Prophet's wife, Sauda bint Zama, his daughters Fatima and Kulsum, and Abu Bakr's family also came to Quba. Moreover, it is also narrated that the families of the Prophet and Abu Bakr later emigrated, accompanied by Zayd ibn Harith and Abu Rafi, who had come from Medina. The Prophet set out from Quba to Yathrib with his convoy on the 12th of Rabi al-Awwal, 24th September 622, on a Friday. When the time for the Friday prayer set in, the Prophet visited the Salim ibn Auf tribe in the Ranuna Valley. There he recited his first Friday sermon, then leading the prayer. After first praising and exalting Allah, he asserted that human beings would most certainly be judged in the hereafter, that everyone would be held accountable for the people under their authority, and that nothing could avail them after death save the deeds of righteousness they performed while in the world. He counselled them to be prepared for the hereafter by competing to carry out good deeds, whether great or small. Setting out for Yathrib after the prayer, the Prophet was welcomed with great fervour by the townsfolk. There was an atmosphere of celebration and festivity in Medina, the likes of which had never been seen before. Everyone, young and old alike, lined up on both sides of the road, greeting Prophet Muhammad in great jubilation. All the while, tambourines were being played, and the following verses gave voice to the overwhelming emotions experienced. Oh, the white moon rose over us from the valley of Wada, and we owe it to show gratefulness where the call is to Allah. O you who were raised among us, coming with a word to be obeyed, you have brought to this city nobleness. Welcome, best caller, to God's way. Everyone wanted the Prophet to stay in their house and persisted with their invitations. The Prophet entered the city on his camel, Kaswa, greeting the people and thanking them. He entered the city saying that he would stay in the house closest to the point where his camel came to rest, and became a guest at Abu Ayyub al-Ansari or Khalid ibn Zayd's house. As such, the Meccan period, a time of great suffering and pain, had come to an end, and a new period had begun in Islamic history. Yathrib was now known as Madinat al-Rasul, denoting the city of the Prophet, or Madina al-Munawwara. In the sources that relate the events connected to the exodus of Prophet Muhammad from Mecca, his arrival in Quba, and his entry into Medina, different dates are reported. Careful consideration of these accounts reveals that the people of Mecca decided upon assassinating the Prophet on Thursday 9th September 622. That the Prophet learned about this situation, leaving the city and going to the cave of Thawr the same night. That he stayed there from the 10th through the 12th September 622. Left the cave on Monday the 1st Rabi al-Awwal, 13th September 622, and arrived in Quba, and that he entered Medina on Friday 12th Rabi al-Awwal, 24th September 622.